Greetings, space wizards. This is Erico Blueberry. It's an unassuming Destiny podcast. My name is chillybin.
I'm Meckii.
We have got a real humdinger of an episode this week. We intentionally put off our recording until Saturday. We usually record on a Thursday because there were a whole slate of updates between dev insights on ability tuning, exotic armor changes, as well as not one but two Bungie ViDocs coming in at about 8 minutes or so each, and also a This Week in Destiny that had some pretty interesting stuff as well. Not to mention a season finale mission that I was not expecting to drop this week, with an equally momentous cutscene. So this, I guess, is your official spoiler warning at the top of the episode. We will be talking about all of the above, including the finale mission for Season of the Wish and the cutscene that drops right after you finish it. So if you haven't done that yet, pause this joint, go play that mission, watch that cutscene, or you can just find it on YouTube if you don't want to do that or you haven't been playing Destiny for a while. But there's some interesting stuff in there. Yeah. So without further ado, let's get into that finale mission.
Yeah. It's kind of funny because Wednesday I loaded in being like, man, I need to find some stuff to do to talk about tomorrow. Like, I need to try and get brave. I'm going to jump into the fire team finder. I'm going to try and do some stuff for us to talk about. And then I got the pop-up and it was like, hey, guess what? There's a mission. I was like, excuse me?
Yeah, I had no idea it was coming. I hadn't opened the game yet. I just happened to be looking at Twitter and I saw someone referencing finale mission. And I was like, I guess that could be this week. It was either going to be this week or next week. And then I opened the game and sure enough, there's a little pop-up when you're in the director screen that says, go to the helm and talk to Osiris. And basically his... because he was researching the Veil. We had all the Veil containment lore drops throughout sort of the last year. There was a while there. Yes. It was every week. And then it kind of just dropped off. And he was like, I need to go deep into the hole here and research some shit. So he's been in the books. He's been in his student era, and he's finally emerged and said peep this, Black Garden. Heard of it?
Yeah. He and Nimbus were pretty much like, we got work to fucking do.
Yeah, so you drop back into the Black Garden. You're kind of just roaming through there. There's Vex. It's kind of, was it Soul Divisive are back again. It's
don't give up.
Yeah, and you kind of you're moving through and you get to essentially what is quite obviously the arena, the combat arena for this mission. And it is none other than the Black Heart once again. And I think Osiris basically says the Vex are trying to go inside the Traveler instead of us, and that they couldn't have done it without help from the Witness. So this is kind of the Black Heart is said to be a simulation or basically a version of the Veil that the Vex have created. So I think the Witness is looking at that as well, if I could just get them to go in instead, then I don't have to deal with the Guardians. And so
he's calling in reinforcements almost too.
Yeah. So
because he'd know we're coming.
Yeah. So then you're just in this combat arena, and there's these giant statues of Vex Minotaurs, and then they all come to life. And there's 3 or 4 of them that you have to beat down, and
they're all called the something mind.
Yeah, classic Vex shit, honestly. But there's a big health bar at the bottom that says Black Heart, and every one of those that you kill, as you damage the Minotaurs, it takes that down. You're never actually shooting the Black Heart, but not exactly revolutionary in terms of what you're doing in the mission and the combat and things like that. That's classic Destiny, adds mini bosses, big yellow
interesting
health bar.
Plot.
Yeah, very very juicy lore in the mission. So you finish that, and it's like, hey, come back to the helm, talk to Osiris. I was like, cool, load that, expecting to just fly out, and there to be like, you know, a little bit of dialogue, one of those sort of interactions. And then a fucking cutscene happens. And so the cutscene starts on the other side of the triangular portal into the Traveler. And I always assumed it was kind of like a teleporter situation in that Crow would have just immediately popped out on the other side. But this is where we see him pop in and then fall. So I don't know if this is like exactly happening now or if it's like meant to be in the past when he first went through. But I really like the idea that for like, what, 2 months, he's just been traveling through this fucking wormhole, just like,
just screaming.
Yeah, and then he does like a really long fall and then does the classic Hunter thing of jumping just before the ground and going boop and just being fine. It's very funny.
Yeah.
And then there is someone shoots at him and the camera swings around and it is very clearly a Hunter with the way it's fucking dodging and rolling. And as soon as I saw the first little bit of that character animating, I was like, it's got to be Cade.
What other Hunter is in there that we know of right now?
Exactly. But it was also just like kind of the expectation of like, oh yeah, you would set up that initial confrontation between the two of them as soon as Crow is in there. So yeah, they're kind of like dancing around, shooting at each other, and then Crow falls and is trying to reach for his gun, grabs it, points it up in a like very symmetrical, very like bookends approach of mirroring the shot where Crow, then Aldrin, killed Cade, with them pointing their guns at each other.
Classic, yeah, and Aldrin's on the floor in the same position. And
yeah.
I think I screenshotted it and sent it to you, and I was like, the way that they mirrored Cade's death scene
it's also the third time we've seen that shot, because we also had Zavala reaching down to pull Crow up from like the season where Keitel was really prominent.
Oh, the attempted assassination cutscene.
That's right. Yeah. And so that was the first time we'd seen that scene mirrored, and this is now the second. So it's telling, I guess, like how sparing they've been calling back to that. And like how kind of like meaningful each of those scenes was.
It's also in a way too, each of them is a subversion of that moment in time.
Yeah.
Like it's the second time you see it, it's in the context of someone extending their hand to help someone who was in that previous scene who did something evil.
Yeah.
Who most people would not forgive.
Yes.
Me.
Well, and this is where it gets like kind of nuanced in this version, because like they're pointing their guns at each other and then Glint comes out. And that I think alone is the signal to Cade that like, oh, this is someone different. Like something here has changed. And that's where I think Cade says at first, like, I thought you died, or the other way around. And they kind of just say like, yeah,
and then the other one's like, yeah, you too.
And that's when he offers the hand to pull him up, because like there's that moment of like, oh yeah, this is something different. This is not the same person, even though it looks like it is. And as soon as you see the ghost, it's like, well, knowing what you know, having been a Guardian, you would know that this is, in theory, a completely different person. You wouldn't be able to know yet that they have their memories of being Aldrin. You know, it's just like, here's the body, a ghost has put a spirit in it. Normally that means you don't get your past memories, but in this case, it does.
And I feel like that's going to be a big thing in Final Shape. It's because Aldrin has had to wrestle with what he did, and now what he did is in his face.
Yeah.
This isn't going through the memories and having the people around him be like, you fucking killed Cade, homie. Like,
yeah,
ew, you're the worst.
Yeah.
Stinky. This is him having...
I was going to say, put a pin in that, because I'm going to call back to that in a minute.
Yeah. This is him having to directly face what he did, in the most literal sense.
Yes. And then, yeah, that I think is largely where that cutscene sort of wraps up. is him pulling him up, and then we do eventually go to the helm. We talk to Osiris. There's a really sweet moment where in like a radio broadcast afterwards where he's talking to Saint, and they're basically talking about like almost aspirationally like what their lives will be like after this is all resolved. And I think it's the first time we've heard them tell each other that they like just saying "I love you" back and forth. And it's just the cutest shit.
That got me. Like, I teared up a little bit, especially when Osiris is like, "Yes, we'll be able to traverse the stars again."
Yeah. Well,
And I
also
was
because
just like,
they
"Oh,
were also
it's
talking about like maybe stepping into positions of leadership because they're like, oh, we never wanted to do that, but it's like, well, we're different people now, and things have changed. So there's some growth within themselves as well.
There's another thing we need to remember is Osiris and Saint haven't always been the perfect quote unquote couple throughout their union that we've known of. They've had several falling out. Like Saint didn't like that Osiris was playing with Strand.
Yeah, true.
You know.
Yeah. And then we get given a ship, an exotic ship called Unforeseen Consequences, which I think is an interesting name given the lore attached to the ship.
The whole thing feels like foreshadowing.
Yeah, so it's essentially a conversation that was obviously in the past between Mara and Crow. It's largely Crow expressing remorse about having killed Cade, and says, just to read a quote from Crow out of that, he says, "Before then, I could have taken a different road, but once I pulled that trigger, everything else I can set right, but not that. I just wish I could tell him I shouldn't have done it." And I'll say that again, I just wish I could tell him I shouldn't have done it. Which I point out because the last line is Mara saying, "See you soon, oh brother mine," which is canonically the thing Riven has said when granting a wish. Now we think back to that cutscene being confronted with Cade, and I've been wondering this whole fucking time
how he comes
back, and I think I have my answer.
And you've got to remember, we've got, what is it, 8 Ahamkara in our possession right now. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, either Riven heard that, and that was one of her final wishes, or the babies heard that.
My theory is that it is Riven because the like O blank mine construction is so heavily related to her and our like previous interactions with her, and also like Riven and Mara have a history. So like if Riven has, how long, if Riven is somehow manipulating Mara, how long has that been going on? Is it even Mara?
Also, like, was this part of the final wish?
Yeah. Which one is the final wish at this point? Like sending him through, or actually no, this conversation would have happened prior to that because it's them talking face to face. So I mean, him going through the portal, I think, is still that last wish that Riven grants.
Last wish TM.
Last wish _ final _ v2.pdf. But yeah, so that, and also unforeseen circumstances, right? Like no, unforeseen consequences. Sorry, I keep thinking that it's circumstances, but it's not. That is like, I don't think in that moment Crow would have been intending that as an Ahamkara wish. But I also have to imagine that when he's confronted with him inside the Traveler, that he's like, fuck. Fuck, Riven done did it again.
What is the fucking Ahamkara twist to this wish now? Yeah,
well, because we also see Ace of Spades has kind of been like reconstructed, and there's light glowing out through the cracks, similar to what is it? It's like is it Japanese or Chinese, the art form where you like put a vase back together
it starts
with gold?
it's Japanese. It starts with a K.
Yeah, so it kind of reminds me of that in a way. But yeah, I am dying to know what the like cost of that wish is. Hmm.
At least we know how Cade's back now.
Yes. Yeah, maybe it's a case of like he's back, but he's not a guardian, so he could die again. Or that almost doesn't seem to have enough gravity for the fact that he's been brought back.
The only time I could think of that having any gravity, and like obviously we don't want to theorize on plot, but it's like him re-sacrificing himself. Because when you think about the way he died, that was an unintended sacrifice because he went in there so cocky because he's a guardian.
Mm,
You know, he was reckless, and
yeah.
that in a way cost him his ghost.
Mm,
Um, maybe we lose him as a sacrifice, like he sacrifices himself again for the greater good,
yeah.
or the alternative of that is we flip it and we lose Aldrin or Crow.
Yeah. Yeah, you take his place
It's
eventually.
Aldrin's way of making things right.
Could be. Could be.
Because I thought about that because in that lore piece, he talks about like I can make everything from that moment right, but I could never make that moment right. So what
Yeah.
if making that moment right was
Yeah. Yeah. What does he say? Like, yeah, once I pull that trigger, everything else I can set right, but not that. That being the act of killing him.
yeah.
I just wish I could tell
So
him
I'm
I
wondering
shouldn't have done it.
if a sacrifice or something is the way that he makes things right.
Maybe. Maybe that's essentially like the end of Crow's arc is like finding the thing that he feels is appropriate atonement. Um, but it also,
Because like,
but I also don't want his resolution to be becoming a martyr
yeah.
or a pariah or anything like that. It's like you kind of have had a bit of a redemption arc. You don't need to like then go and die for your own like pride or whatever it is.
I don't know. I feel like we're gonna lose a couple of characters in this
Oh,
expansion.
dude, no doubt. And
They're gonna make me cry again, aren't they?
my biggest now worry is that it's Osiris and or Saint, given the way that they just tucked that in there this week to be like, oh, they're already they're
They
thinking about the future, they're thinking about their lives together, like yonk.
they do that a lot because they
Yeah.
did that to Anna and Rasputin
Mm.
and other characters. Oh
That's
shit.
now my big
Mm.
worry, is that it's one or both of them. Because Osiris doesn't have a ghost, I could see one of them being like, or him probably being like, I'll be the sacrifice, or Saint doing it, and then the other one runs in to be like, no, we have to go together. That's not to make lore predictions or story predictions here, but I think if anyone is gonna go, I'm looking there first.
Dude, Final Shape is already gonna be rough enough for me.
I'm feeling it. I'm now that we're what like a week and a half out, and after the VDocs, which we will talk about 100%, I am starting to feel the like. It's a weird mixture of like.
It's the weight for me.
It's excitement and anxiety, but not the anxiety that typically comes with excitement. It's more like, oh, this giant story that has been a part of my life for 10 years is finally coming to a close. And like, I don't have any other like fiction based property in the world that I have followed for that long.
Yeah. You gotta think this franchise has grown up with us through our adult life.
Yeah.
It came out when we were what, 21, 22?
Bruh, no.
The first Destiny?
Well,
The
it's
first
10
Destiny.
years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, sort of mid 20s, yeah. And it's like I was largely like playing it by myself when I first started, and now it's very different. Like I've found people around it as well.
Yeah.
God.
I fully intend, once everything is said and done, and obviously we'll get into it more with the VDoc recaps, but I do fully intend on doing like a proper Destiny retrospective once I finish the campaign of Final Shape.
Mm. Yeah. All right. Now, before we get into the VDocs, let's get into like some kind of dry mechanical shit that's changing with the
It's
final
time to
shape.
talk about
No,
numbers.
well, I didn't actually,
Kinda.
I didn't really pull any of the numbers in here because that's whatever. That doesn't give me an indication of how these changes will feel. But yeah, just to run through some of the like ability tuning updates, some of the exotics and armor update, and then also a new system called Pathfinder. I haven't look. These posts are massive, as you know if you've read them before. I've really only pulled out the stuff that I think is interesting and or relevant to the way you and I play. If you are watching / listening to this and you don't hear your favorite class, build, damage type, whatever mentioned, go to read for yourself. Control F, type in name of exotic or ability that you love, and see if it has changes. Because there's a bit in there. But
So before we jump in for
yeah,
context, I haven't had a chance to read it because I was doing VDoc note taking and
yeah,
research all this morning. So you've pulled stuff out for me based on what you know of me as a player,
yes,
and we'll see how accurate that is.
yes. Also, the exotics and armor update isn't super like it isn't super widespread. Like it's maybe 1 or 2 exotics per class, although hunters have like 6 that are getting tweaked. Suck shit, I guess. Neither of us really play hunters. So yeah, abilities. Let's start there. So stasis generally getting a bit of a rework because stasis came out, then they started doing the like light 3.0 stuff, and stasis never really got a big overhaul or a rebalance. They're introducing a new frost armor keyword, which is like a stacking damage resistance effect. And there's a bunch of stuff in there about like which classes can, or like how each class can get frost armor through like aspects and whispers and whatever the fuck. Stasis shards are getting boosted because they're kind of not like providing as much value as they would like. So there's like some interesting stuff they're talking about with like melee feeding into stasis shards a bit more than they currently do. Neither of us play stasis that much, but this might get me to look at it again because there's a decent amount of change there. Well of Radiance.
Oh yes.
Have you heard about the Well of Radiance changes yet? Because people are talking.
No.
Okay. So they're trying to move away from it giving effectively invincibility, and because it also makes it basically the only defensive option that a fire team will consider if you've got a warlock in the party. Like we know this from raids. It's like someone get a well, everybody else is going full like offensive supers, right? But Well of Radiance also gives a big offensive boost as well. So they're pushing it more towards that offensive side and away from defensive. So
interesting.
You will get Radiant, which doubles your damage output for 8 seconds after you leave the well, so you can kind of just dip in and out of it. But they're reducing the healing and damage resistance effects. That's why people are talking.
And you know what? We'll get into it in the VDoc, but I think I know why they did this.
I mean, it's I think on a more general sense, they like to have a bit more variability in the things people are running. This is basically like the meta for DPS phases in raids and things like that. Just like, oh, put the well down in this spot that everybody knows, and we'll all just stand there and shoot because you are basically impossible to kill and you get boosted damage. I think it is a bit more general than like stuff that's coming for Final Shape. This is like a bit of a long time coming fix, it feels like, because it's just so dominant. And I said all of that is to say, Ward of Dawn is getting a similar treatment. The old Titan bubble. So it's meant to be, as they kind of explain, it's meant to be a defensive safe haven, but it doesn't actually fit that well with how they design combat encounters, which I thought was interesting. And then I thought more about like when I've used it outside of like, setting up for a boss damage, and it's like, oh, everybody jump in the bubble, get the weapons of light damage boost, and then jump back out. Or that's kind of the main way I use it, and it kind of makes sense because I'm not using it for defense. I'm not staying in there to avoid dying or anything. It's just like, oh yeah, it's kind of like it does that, which is great, but it's also like, oh, weapons of light is wicked. So they are pushing that more towards the defensive side of things. So where are my notes here? Yeah, so they're changing it to give you defensive buffs when you're fighting around it, not just in it, which I think is actually kind of neat. The way that that's going to work is, I keep losing my place. Allies near the bubble will get a void overshield added over time. So as long as you're like kind of running around the bubble, maybe dipping into it to like top up an overshield, you will just kind of have this void overshield applied to you as you stay near the bubble, which I think is pretty interesting. And then moving weapons of light out of it, which is the thing, like you're in the bubble, you get just damage output, and that lasts for like 10 or 15 seconds after you leave it.
Interesting.
You will now only be able to have weapons of light if you're running Helm of Saint 14. So you have to intentionally build into running Ward of Dawn to get kind of everything that we're used to Ward of Dawn doing.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So it makes it a bit more of a tactical piece than it currently is. And I think like both Well and Ward, I've had this happen before where like you put it down, you're in it or near it, and then as soon as it's gone, people will die because you're relying on it to keep you alive. It disappears and suddenly you're surrounded by enemies.
Yeah.
That's I think both of these may help to address that because the well changes are incentivizing you to move in and out of it, as opposed to just standing in it. And the ward changes are like, well, yeah, you want to be moving around it and dipping into it if you need to, hide. But yeah, these two changes in particular have a lot of people making a lot of noise. But I think from the design standpoint that they kind of explain, I get why they're doing this. Like they are a bit oversubscribed because of just how generically good they are.
Yeah, I definitely find like, and it's not just exclusive to our fire team, there's a lot of fire teams that in raids and stuff, they rely on well.
Yeah, and that's the part that I'm most interested about. Like, what does it force people into in terms of playstyles or loadouts? Because this isn't as much of a crutch. It isn't a thing you can just lean back on and be like, it's fine, I'll just stand in the well, whatever. It does make the classic like well plus divinity combo a little more challenging. Something to think about there. But there's ways to build around trace rifles if you want to like have someone do that role really well. I don't know. Who knows what people will switch to?
Our go-to for div well combo is the final encounter in Deepstone. So I think I would like, once these changes come in, I would like to rerun Deepstone just to see how it feels.
Yeah, and that's more for like the divinity cage, like kind of extending under the boss and being much easier to hit than its head, which is way up on top.
But also us having to walk that line in between those two circles of rocks.
Yeah, do we have to now move a bit more? Like, don't get me wrong, Well of Radiance will still provide, damage resistance. It's just not as much. So in that encounter, I think we're going to be fine because there's no enemies there to be hitting us. It's more for those situations where you're just standing at a boss's feet. They're hitting the shit out of you, but you're not dying.
Yeah. So maybe something where even a strike or something where the boss is a little bit stompy.
Yeah.
We could test it.
Yeah, that sort of stuff. Like Proving Grounds, probably a good one.
Yeah.
Because you're surrounded by big enemies and the boss is huge.
Stuff like that too has me interested in terms of making some Warlock exotics viable again.
Warlock axolotls?
Warlock axolotls. Because there are exotics, I think it's Sanguine Alchemy, that
it's
while you're
rifts,
in
right?
Yeah. There's another one that while you're in the well, killing ads in the well feeds back into your super energy, I think, but I can't remember which one it is. But I'm wondering if that's going to make some of these neglected solar exotics for warlocks more viable again.
Yeah, it might
These
be
changes.
worth you looking at the exotic armor update after this, because there were a few warlock pieces in there. Like I think Mantle of Battle Harmony is getting an update, but that's more about like damage types. I believe. I don't play warlock a lot, so. But yeah, those are the big ones.
I'm mostly interested in solar because with some of the changes coming in final shape, I am 100% looking at doing a radiant build.
Radiant's great. There's another few bits out of this abilities update. Consecration, the thing that I very recently switched to on my Solar Titan, that's just getting a bit of a damage boost, which I'm very happy about. Hammer of Soul, which is the Titan throwing hammer super, not the big spinny one, the regular throwing one. If you don't have Soul Invictus equipped, that's the thing that gives you sunspots. There's changes there, but I really don't understand who's doing that. Like, if you're throwing hammers around, why are you not creating sunspots that do more damage and heal you when you go through them? So I didn't even bother to write down what the changes were, because that to me doesn't make any sense. The Titan shield throw is getting more bounces, longer lifetime, and better tracking, and I could not be more excited. It's also getting a boost.
Time, baby.
Also getting a boost to its PvE damage, I think like 20% or something. So I am going to bring that build out again, I think. The old Doomfang Pauldrons just slinging disc. So excited. Nova Bomb getting a little bit of a tweak to get more output. The Cataclysm variant, the one that has like all the little seekers, getting more of those. And the Vortex one, which is the one that kind of just like lingers, that's getting a longer linger duration. So
both very good for my current build.
Think about some Void. Banner of War, the Titan Strand thing that is just fucking everywhere and always has been since it came out. Finally getting a bit of a nerf. I didn't write down what it is because I've still never used it. And that's abilities.
Interesting.
Well, that's what I pulled out of that post. There's tons more shit in there. Go read it for yourself. Let us know in the comments what you're angry/happy about. Now, onto exotics. I've got half as many bullet points on this. The first one is a bit more of a generic one. Exotic armor and armor mods that reference your equipped subclass element. They're getting updated to refer to your equipped super element, which is all in preparation for prismatic. Because up until now, it's been like you've got one element type for your subclass. Now it's like, well, who fucking knows? So they're pinning it against your chosen super.
Interesting.
Yeah, because there's tons of those things. It's like, your harmonic damage mods and things like that, which are like do more damage based on the weapons element matching the super element or the class element, whatever.
Subclass.
Yeah, and there's like a whole range of those. So that's pretty neat.
And if the dev VDoc, we'll talk more about it soon, but if the VDoc's anything to go by, we're about to get a whole bunch of harmonic weapons too.
Yes. I think I know what you're referring to, and I think that is more just like some flavor that they put on that exotic gun, but we'll get to that in a minute. I wrote here, Titan, no changes that really affect any of my builds. If you're a Titan, go read it for yourself. There's some stuff in there, but there was something about like Heart of Inmost Light is not getting any changes. It's just getting like some UI updates to make it easier to understand. There's a few of those in there.
Okay.
Yeah. Warlock. The only one I thought to pull out here was Sun Braces. They're getting tuned down a little. The solar grenade duration is going from 4 seconds to 2 seconds. And while the Sun Braces effect is active, you will get 4 grenades instead of 5. Yeah.
Not huge.
Not huge, still but usable. Like it's a pretty
still very usable for my build.
Yeah, it's a pretty good like damage output combo. It's just getting like a little bit off the top. Exotic. Okay. This one might take a bit of work to explain. So, Artifice armor, the stuff you get out of like Legend dungeons that have the extra mod slot. If you're trying to do a full set of Artifice armor so that you can try and get like much higher stat builds on your total total numbers. There's always the exotic slot that is letting the team down because it doesn't have that, right? So what they're doing is exotic armor can be upgraded after it's fully masterworked to give it an artifice mod slot. And it will cost you 1 exotic cipher and 10,000 glimmer. Pretty reasonable cost because I keep getting exotic ciphers off my season pass that I cannot use. So that's just like just a little bit of extra sweetener on people that are trying to get like, you know, your classic 100 build, or those sort of fiendish combos that you can get on the stat rolls.
I like that because a lot of my builds rely on me to have double or triple hundreds.
Yeah, and like
to be like
mod,
top functionality.
Yeah, those artifice mods only give +5, I believe, but they don't cost you anything, so you just get it. Which is always the thing I find I trade off when I'm putting mods into armor is like if I don't have the artifice slot, sometimes I don't put a stat mod in there because everything else costs too much, and I'm like, I'd rather these effects than boosting mobility or whatever. Usually it's resistance or restoration, but yeah, sometimes the effects are more valuable to me. And heavy and special ammo finders. So those basically currently they count up number of kills until you drop one, but that gets reset when you die. So they are removing that so that it will keep tracking towards dropping an ammo brick even after you die. So that's just kind of a nice little quality of life thing. But yeah, there's a bunch more detail in there. Not super interesting. To us anyway. You might read it and go, this sucks. I hate this game. But I didn't. So whatever, make your own podcast. Last thing before we get into the ViDocs, we're already going a bit long, but this I think is super cool. They are introducing a new pursuit system called Pathfinder. And this is intended to consolidate bounties, patrols, and weekly vendor challenges. There's some goals that they're trying to hit with this, and I'll get to those at the end. But essentially, it takes like all of those disparate systems and just jams them into one thing that you actually have a decent amount of control over. So it's not like, I've got to go and do my Crucible bounties and my Gambit bounties and like rank up this fucking vendor and all this stuff. It's kind of like it looks like a triangle system where like you've got 6 options in the first row, and then it gets narrower and narrower as you work through the 5 tiers. There's 20 objectives across those 5 tiers, and when you finish it, you get what looks like in the image from the post, like either a prime or a powerful reward or something like that. But it's intended to be like a decent reward, but you're earning stuff along the way. And you're basically just completing a path like through these nodes. So you get to choose which one you do next to get you from left to right through this thing. You can reset your Pathfinder, costs you a bit of glimmer, but it lets you just do that again. And the interesting thing here is that they call out procedural generation, which is basically just like, it's not AI, but it's like people trying to sell you some bullshit would probably try and call it AI, but it's just once you start resetting your Pathfinder, your Pathfinder and my Pathfinder will start to diverge, because it will probably, what it seems like is it'll be based on the things you choose as you move through it. That will then feed into what your next one has as options when you reset it. So it actually like starts to match your playstyle potentially. It's unclear at this stage, but it seems interesting that like we're not all going to be seeing the same system. But that's where things like bounties and patrols and vendor challenges are going to live. The final shape will launch with 2 Pathfinders, one for all Guardians. It sounds like you just get this at the start, that replaces bounties for weekly challenges, for bounties and weekly challenges for core ritual activity. So your Crucible, your Strikes, your Gambits. And then you'll unlock another one in the Pale Heart during the campaign. And both they're effectively, they talk about them as cards, kind of like event cards or trials cards, I guess, where like you do it, you reset it, you just hold on to it. But yeah, so there are four goals that they explained in more detail than I'm going to here. Number one is consolidation. I'm a big fan of this because it is fucking overwhelming sometimes when you go in and you're like, oh, I've got like an hour. Let me just grab all of these fucking bounties and quests and shit, and then like, what do I do first? This kind of just like streamlines that, I think. Goal two being giving players more agency. As I said, you kind of like picking which one you focus on next, and then you reset it, and then it sounds like, sort of follow that. Number three is making decisions matter more. I think that kind of ties into the previous one. You get to choose what you do next, and sometimes it'll force you to go outside your comfort zone. So that's interesting. And then reducing barriers, and the thing that they kind of used as examples here was flying to locations. So just like killing a bunch of downtime between, running activities or patrols or whatever the fuck. So yeah, pretty decent overhaul, I would say. Pretty comprehensive. Very interested to see how this looks and feels as we, do a few pathfinders and reset them and see how they change over time.
Yeah, I'm super interested to jump into that new system.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm not sure, like, they've got a bunch of icons in the images. I'm not sure, like, which are bounties versus patrols versus, like, whatever else. So that there's some more detail to come. But again, we're like a week and a half away, so we don't have to wait long.
It'll be interesting. I've got some friends who have just jumped into Destiny, and I'm like, what a weird time to get into a game.
Yeah, although there's a ton of shit in there to just, like, ramp you up very quickly.
Yeah.
But then it's
so
all
I'd
going to
like
change.
to see how. Yeah, I was going to say I'd like to see how the Pathfinder system pairs for new players.
Yeah, that was like the first thought I had, is that goal of consolidation feels like one of the biggest barriers to new players. Is like, there's just shit everywhere, and it's not easy to find. And like, unless you're pulling bounties using the mobile app or over the API, like, you have to go to the location to pick them up.
It's like, if it was more easy to navigate, it would feel like you're spoiled for choice in terms of what you do when you first start playing.
Yeah.
But because it is kind of so all over the place and it is so confusing at times.
Yeah.
Love Bungie, but like for new players, it is confusing.
Yeah. The thing
I've got mates jumping. Sorry, I was going to say,
go.
I got mates jumping in who are constantly messaging me, being like, "Mech, what do I fucking do now?
Yeah.
What do you reckon I do? What do you recommend I do? Can you come do activities with me? Can you come help me?" Because they just don't know where to start or what to do.
No. How would
I
you?
feel like streamlining that it's going to feel more like people are spoiled for choice rather than just
Well,
lost.
it seems like there's maybe less choice, but to their goal, the choices will matter more. It's like, oh, you have like 1 to 3 options to pick from, or whatever it is. But no, the thing I was going to say before is that I constantly have this thought in the back of my head when I am playing Destiny, of like, what am I leaving on the table? Because like, I don't really play Crucible all that much, but there's entire reward structures there that I am not touching. I do the seasonal stuff mostly at the moment. Do a bunch of Onslaught, but it's like, oh, there's entire sets of things that I am just not getting out of the game that are just sitting there. Am I missing something that would be valuable to me? But it's also
I'm the same
impossible
with
to discover that.
unless it's required for a mission or a seasonal activity, I can't remember the last time I touched a strike.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what am I missing out on?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, hey, we'll find out in a couple of weeks. We'll find some paths
soon,
and then we'll find different paths as we reset them.
in a fortnight's time.
Yes. Now, it's VDoc time, baby. We had not one but two of these drop within, I don't know, a 24-hour period. It was crazy.
They're like, surprise, bitch, but also surprise again, bitch. I was like,
they did give us a heads up, so it was less surprise and more like, look at this thing we've got for you. You just have to wait 8 hours. And for us, it was 2 a.m. So I was like, I'm going to watch this over breakfast or on the tram in the way to work. All right, the first VDoc they're both titled Becoming Legend. First one was subtitled Confronting Oblivion, and I think it was more focused on like the journey and the end of the story than the second one. Yeah, you took the notes here? I didn't. Do you want to
Yeah.
take the lead here? Talk me through it.
I didn't write a shitload of notes, and I didn't write a lot of technical notes because these VDocs didn't really dig deep technical wise.
No,
It was more of like they focused a lot on what's coming and the aesthetics of what's coming, and
more like
um
art and
it,
design in this first one, especially.
yeah, so I feel just to preface it, my feeling on this was those streams gave credence and acknowledgement to the more technical side of the development team, where they were talking about weapon tuning and game design and that kind of stuff. And then these VDocs felt like the art teams and the testing teams and the design teams got more of a moment in the sun.
Mm.
These were more of like a casual consumption of new updates and
Yeah,
news and stuff.
yeah,
So these were a lot more focused on art design, play feel, story, sound
yeah.
in some cases. So it started with and had me almost in tears
Well,
off the bat.
I think before you say it, like that first person speaking is the new creative director, right? Is it
Yeah,
Tyson
yeah.
Green?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, from memory. I meant to write down their names and I forgot. I
yeah.
feel terrible.
But he's essentially like the person who stepped into Joe Blackburn's previous role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our first kind of experience with him is him opening up and saying, the one thing that stuck with me from day one and the first time I heard it in game was the term guardians make their own fate. And he was talking about how that's so prevalent in game, but it's also prevalent in our real lives as well. Like we craft and we make decisions and, you know, morality and whatnot. And they wanted to take that into the game as well. Um, but yeah, his whole if you haven't seen it yet, go watch the VDocs,
Mm.
but, like, his whole little speech about guardians make their own fate was like I was like, "Oh, we're starting with the feels right off the bat."
Mm-hmm.
So they're in the first VDoc, they take us more into the Pale Heart. So they give us a little bit more information, not lore, but a little bit more background into the Pale Heart. First of all, they started with the art design and how they approach the art design. So they were saying straight off the bat, they wanted the Pale Heart to feel familiar, but also wrong at the same time.
Yeah.
So there's all these familiar locations, these moments where you're like, I've been here before, but also I
Hands.
haven't because
Also
this
hands everywhere.
body parts. The word was body parts.
Yeah.
So they were talking about when they first started thinking about the Pale Heart, what design elements made them feel that way, and their key art designer started playing with surrealism. And it's like
And he
it's familiar,
described it as like familiar things taken out of context.
taken out of context and twisted.
Yeah.
So it feels familiar, but it also feels like unsettling. And I thought that was great because I love surrealist comedy, I love surrealist art, I love surrealist horror.
Yeah.
So
Also, a couple of the sort of shots they were showing while they were talking about making it unsettling, I felt uncomfortable looking at it. I was like, oh, this is wrong. What are you doing?
yeah. So one way they did that is they started to incorporate familiar elements in places they don't belong. And for a lot of people and a lot of surrealist artists, when they approach surrealism, they play with body parts and the
Mm.
human shape because there's something unsettling about the human shape being twisted out of context.
I mean, you only have
And
to look at like
that's
the uncanny valley effect, where it's like a
yeah.
digital face that's almost photogenic, makes you feel
Yeah.
deeply weird.
So one way they did that, and an example they gave us is like, oh, this is the pyramid ship from Vow of the Disciple,
Mm.
VOD. But instead of trees, it's hands.
Yeah. The one that stuck out to
Um,
me is like there's what looks like a little wooden cabin in the middle of an open expanse and there's a chimney, but the smoke coming out of it is the shit that comes out of the witness's head, like the
Yes.
faces and the smoke. I was like, oh, I hate this.
Another thing, it's like it's a shape that feels like the downed ship, like Failsafe's ship on Nessus, but it's a rib cage. So faces everywhere where you wouldn't expect to see them, which is part of the witness's design. So you'll be going through something that feels familiar, but then when you stop and look, it's actually faces.
Yeah.
And they said they wanted to play with horror and anxiety-inducing elements, but they didn't want to go to the point of body horror because, like, then the game's R-rated, ain't it?
Yeah.
Also, just body horror is not for everyone.
No.
So for me, from what they showed, it actually walks this very like comfortable line between body horror and surrealist horror. I think we joked when we did watch the original announcement kind of VDoc that it felt very Kojima.
It did a bit, yeah.
The way that Kojima plays with familiar elements and then twists them. And even now, it still very much feels kind of very Del Toro.
I mean,
Kojima
I'm just thinking about
way.
Death Stranding, where you kill a BT and there's the little golden hand thing that comes out of the ground. Like, that's all I could think about.
But there's also like BTs where instead of a head, it's a hand.
Yeah.
Like, so I thought that was really interesting, and I'm so excited to actually play in that world and experience that world myself. That is so fun, and it's nothing like Destiny has gone before.
No.
And I love that they're playing off the element that we're in a very dark part of Destiny lore right now. Like, we're facing oblivion, like the title would say.
Yeah.
And it's make or break, it's do or die at this point. Like, you know. And then they even mentioned like there is going to be kind of through lines that will come through in different characters where some of them might be more like, what if we let it reset?
Yeah, what if we side with the witness, right?
What if the witness won? What would happen if we let him reset everything?
What is it, that Onion headline of like, the worst guy you know just made a great point?
Yeah.
What if actually we listen?
Yeah, because it's like previously it was the collapse. The witness isn't offering a collapse, he's offering a complete reset.
Well, it's interesting because like in the stuff,
but it's a reset.
In the stuff after this finale mission this week, Osiris mentions this as and refers to it as a collapse.
Yeah. But it's also a reset within the context of how the witness thinks everything should be.
Yeah.
He sees himself as a god. He sees himself as correct regardless of what anyone says.
Yeah.
So they also gave us a little bit of an insight into the new enemy type, which is the Dread.
The Dread enemies, yeah, it's so sick.
Yeah. So this is basically a race within the Pale Heart that's been corrupted by the witness. So he can now utilize the light because he's in the Traveler, and he's using the light to corrupt, which is very interesting to me.
Yeah.
The Dread are once again playing with familiarity, hard word, where it is species and races that we're used to seeing, but also not.
Yeah.
They've been corrupted in a really interesting
reminding
way.
Me of like the Scorn compared with the Elixni, but like to a more extreme extent.
But they've been corrupted by light, so they're less ooey gooey and more very like pyramid tech looking. They also kind of remind me of the Heartless from Kingdom Hearts, like nobodies and stuff.
Never played it.
Just the way they move is really interesting.
I'll take your word for it.
People who've played Kingdom Hearts 2 and 3 will know what I mean when I say they remind me of the nobodies. And then they went into the design of them in a couple of really interesting ways. So not only looking at them visibly, but then looking at them on an auditory level.
Linguistically, perhaps.
Linguistically as well. So they go into the folly a little bit where they're like, so we played with a lot of like uncomfortable sounds when we were designing the Dread. Yeah. The folly of man. So they were playing with more like uncomfortable sounds.
Yeah,
so,
I think they said something like slapping a water bladder. And I just thought of like when
They
you get a
had
hot water bottle and you just like smack it a bit.
yeah, they slapping and shaking water bladders, and then another thing they were doing was slapping and, like, crushing Jello.
Yeah, there's one
So it's that
shot of
very
like so I'm
visceral, wet kind of, like, flesh, and it's the kind of things you would expect to hear in a horror movie. It's, like,
yeah.
visceral crunching and, like
Yeah, so I'm using a
yeah.
shotgun mic right now, and there was a shot of the Foley artist with one of those
Just
like here's a bowl of jelly or jello, and the microphone is like here, and he's just getting his hands in that shit. And I'm like, oh, I can hear it. It sucks.
yeah. So it's like that made me think about the other races a little bit, where it's like when you think of the Elixni, you think of insect noises. There's
Clicking,
chattering
yeah.
and clicking and chattering, and when they move, it's like a scuttering sound. And then you've got Screebs who have more of like that, like the crunchy kind of crusty sounds, and then yeah, Taken, they're more synthetic, kind of synthy, and then
Slapping the
these
jello.
slap at a water bottle. For me, the dreads are like it sounds like they're twisting the sounds that we're familiar on and then just making them
Making
yucky
them
and
wet.
unsettling. Yeah, wet and spooky. Um, which I found so interesting because I'm more of an aesthetics over a tech person, especially with Destiny. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, as you mentioned, the pyramid races or the dreads have their own language.
Yeah.
They have developed a language.
Yeah, to the point where they say like you could decipher it, and they basically issued a challenge to the community of like, go for it.
And then this I nearly said fucker. I'm sure he's a lovely person. He speaks an entire sentence in this made up
I know.
language. So you know once people figure it out, we're all gonna go back and watch
I
that.
think my favorite thing I've seen so far since then is shout out to Destiny the meme on Twitter posted a screenshot of that, and the subtitle they put on it is skill issue. It's like, yeah, that's
I hope
that would be great.
I hope they roasted the community in their made up language. That would be so funny.
Yeah.
But I'm excited. I'm excited for people to start translating it. I love a puzzle.
Yeah.
I love a good extra element to a game or music
it's
or like
deeply
lore.
challenging linguistic work to translate a language that nobody speaks. So I don't think I'm going to be solving this one, but I deeply look forward to reading someone do it and then finding out what that man said.
It's like when Game of Thrones came out. Within the first season, people had pretty much figured out the Dothraki language just based on context clues from what they saw in episodes.
I feel like some like linguistic scholar was like, I also like fantasy. Oh, I've figured out the language, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
That's what we need.
So
Who out there is a linguistics expert that plays Destiny?
I'm so excited to see what people figure out, and also in brackets I put Bife is shaking.
Yeah, this is where we get the collab no one could have predicted between Bife and like Tom Scott or someone who just like works it out.
Excited. But I thought that was so interesting, and I highly recommend watching this VDoc because it's so fun, and also the design team are obviously just
it sets a
very on the final expansion.
It sets a very strong tone for how this is all going to look and feel.
Yeah. So the first VDoc, that's basically it, and then there was a cutscene, and the only thing I noticed from that cutscene is someone drop kicks a Screeb.
No, not drop kicks. Kicks it up in the air.
For someone else to shoot. Good. And it happens in slow motion, and it's kind of that comical angle of the Screeb coming up towards the camera, and that gave me a giggle. So that happens at night, roughly 9:05 in the VDoc. So if you want a little bit of a giggle,
I'm going to set my bookmark.
Revenge for all the time Screebs have ended me. VDoc 2, which was called Shaping the Magic?
Yeah, it was something like that.
Something the Magic.
I didn't write it down. Yeah, I'll take your word for it. It was definitely
Shaping the Magic.
Something magic, yeah. Final Shaping the Magic. Final Shaping the Magic the Gathering.
Oh no. We have a card game now. It's like when they brought the Final Fantasy and the Witcher card
Oh
games
yeah,
into the real
the
world.
physical Gwent.
So this is more less about the world being formed and the thought patterns behind the world, and more about the aesthetics and thought and design that goes into things like the new supers, some of the new weapons they kind of give us a little bit of a taste on. And then they make mention of a strike that's coming up too.
Yeah, this is like first part art, second part gameplay is to be super
Yeah.
reductive how these two kind of stack up together.
Yep. The second VDoc is a lot of conversation between the design and the testing teams. And it seems to be like a little bit of like they say, I hate to use this term because they say in the opening scene that the final shape is a love letter to Destiny. But to me, this VDoc felt like a little bit of a love letter to the design and testing teams too, which a lot of people forget about.
Or just like overall a love letter to like the way that they all work together to produce this thing they are
Yeah,
deeply proud of.
yeah. Um, so there was a little bit of a talk of weapons. So one thing I found really interesting is the Pale Heart weapons are themed after suits in a deck of card, which is continuing off Cade's legacy and the legacy of Ace of Spades.
Yeah, because they basically say like, "Oh, we've had the Ace of Spades for so long," and then they just said it in the VDoc like, "Where's the rest of the cards?" And they're
Yeah, where are the
super.
rest of
They
the
look
suits?
so sick.
Yeah. The interesting thing that they mentioned about the designs is it's going to be each side of the gun is like the way that suits are set
But
up.
it's like the colors are inverted. Like one side is
Yeah.
mostly white with a bit of red, and then on the literal just other
Yeah.
side of the same gun, it's red with a little bit of white.
These designs are also going to feature characters that have somehow influenced Cade,
Yeah,
which I thought was really interesting.
yeah,
So we're actually getting more Cade lore and more, it feels like deep Cade lore.
yeah, yeah.
Which is something we spoke about a couple of episodes ago, is like, how are we going to mature this character? And
Yeah.
it seems like we're actually getting a lot of why Cade was the way he was.
Yeah, I'm expecting a lot of
I'm fine with that.
lore dives on these weapons to
I'm
see
fine with
who
that.
they reference. Yeah.
One thing I put in all capitals is looks like there's a machine gun that does what Lumina does.
Well, this is that one you kind of alluded to before, where they referred to it as like shooting harmonic rounds, and it's not just that it does what Lumina does. When you're targeting enemies, it'll damage them, but when you target allies, it'll heal them, and it just does that by itself.
Yeah.
It's such a sick gun. The designers talking about it referred to as a. They said like during testing they referred to it as a never die never die gun, essentially, like make sure you don't die gun.
Yeah.
And then like right before they cut away from talking about that gun, they say, "Oh, we know what we did." So I reckon this gun might be a bit of a heater.
Yeah. From memory, they also spoke a little bit about how the Kvostov is a love letter to the Destiny legacy because it has 7 rounds. Like, it's
Well,
just everything to do with
it bounces
the
7
exotic, yeah.
times. Yeah.
Everything to do with the exotic remake of the Kvostov is 7. And they said, like, this is our love letter to Destiny's weapon legacy as well. And I was like, that's so sweet.
Yeah.
Then that leads them into talking about the new light supers. So I wrote down each of them, just the main key points of what they've mentioned. It doesn't feel like anything super duper brand new. They're not giving us numbers, damage rates, statistics. They're not giving us any of that. They're just giving us the bare bones. Once again, talking a lot about the visuals of these new supers. Not talking about the proc cycle or anything like that. So the first one they talk about, which is what I'm excited about, is the Warlock Super Solar. It's called Song of Flame. It is basically Radiance from D1, but combat focused. And they talk about the visuals of like when someone procs a Ward of Dawn, you see the wings and you know what that is.
Right, Dawnblade.
Not Ward of Dawnblade,
Yeah.
sorry. Because we were talking about Ward of Dawn earlier. When someone procs Dawnblade, other than hearing it, the visual of a warlock with fire wings, you're like, "Oh shit,
Yeah.
that's Dawnblade, run." This they called upon Renaissance imagery.
Like medieval halos, right?
Yeah, so it's a flat halo rather than what we think of Christianity, which is circular above the head. It is around the warlock's upper half,
Yeah.
which I love.
It looks so.
And the warlock is basically
does like
doing
one of
this in
these
the
or
image.
some shit. Yeah.
Yeah. So like it being radiance and also a little bit combat focused, I feel seeing the halo and then a warlock basically doing a is it the robot from Overwatch. You know how the healing bot.
Oh, beyond me.
Yeah. People will know what I mean. I've forgotten his name. I keep going to say Zendaya, but that's an actress.
Zendata?
Something like that, yeah. Zendaya floating towards you. It kind of reminds me of that, like where it could be very daunting imagery if you're on the other team.
Yeah.
Like that just existing, you're like, oh, I know what that is.
Yeah.
The super one, which I thought, Titan Super, which I thought you would be kind of excited about visually. It's Twilight Arsenal.
Mm-hmm.
So it creates axes that you throw.
Yeah.
We know how much you love to throw things.
I do.
The thing I thought you would love about this is the axe is the Titan shield broken up.
Yeah.
Visually.
I don't, because I've shown these supers before, but not in close detail, and I don't think this aspect was obvious then, or it might not have even been decided then. But they show it literally side on. They show like 3 or 4 different design iterations, and then the one that they landed on is basically if you took the throwing shield and took a couple of chunks out of it to give it a more traditional sort of axe head shape. But it looks like, yeah, I don't know if when you activate the super, I'd have to watch it again, but I don't know if the first one is like you hit with it or you throw it, but then it will spawn some number of them just on the ground to be, and I think anyone can pick them up, and then you just kind of get to go in with it. Very interesting.
It is my time to bonk.
Everybody wants to be a Titan. That's what I'm hearing.
Warlocks are here to make you guys feel powerful, and Titans are here
to
for you to be jealous
of.
To
give you something to do with all that power.
And then the final one I didn't take too many notes on because we're not hunters.
Maybe we should be. It feels like we're just missing out.
Yeah.
Ignoring it.
So this one is Arc, and it's called Storm's Edge, and the main thing they mentioned was that it is a callback to Arcblade in D1.
Yep, didn't play it.
And originally they made the super 24 seconds long, but in play testing there was a lot of angry people, so they reduced it to 12.
Yeah, but it
it's like we became very unpopular, so we reduced it to 12.
Yeah, visually it looks like you're throwing an electrified knife and then teleporting to where it lands, which I think is going to just be silly. And getting 12 seconds of that shit, like
so painful in PvP.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then chances are, because I know that there are supers in each class that are tied, exotics tied to specific supers. And I wonder if with them introducing these, there will be new exotic armor pieces that are specifically built with these in mind, or if people are just going to find combos with existing exotics that are disgusting.
Yeah, that's what I'm excited for, is how quickly do we break Destiny again?
Yeah.
And then they told us about a strike that's coming out. So
first of all, I love the energy of the 2 people that talked about this strike, because there's one that like the male presenting guy is like, just seems like very much in terms of like, I love designing strikes, and then the female presenting person with him, I wish we'd put the names down, is basically just like, I've got Gilded Conqueror and I made this shit hard as fuck. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
They describe it visually as it's a memory, it's a memory of witnesses kind of memories. When we're looking at what we know, it's the witnesses raised and then the texture of like the whole did.
Hmm.
And then he just described it as they were again, and it was I was 30s novels, and also a lot of like fiction movies, like Jones and ancient city, ancient
Mm.
city. So they think about like eventually getting down the hallway, and there's jumping out in front of you that you've got to slide around or down, and lava is descending from the ceiling. Like it's very like Indiana Jones boulder down the hallway kind of part.
Yeah.
Um, it's going to be, in quotes, the hardest strike we've ever made. And that's just on the base version. That's not Grandmaster or that's just
Mm.
the normal strike is going to be the
Yeah.
hardest they've ever made. Um, and she was more or less like, I want people to earn this Conqueror title. She's like, you need to earn it in this expansion.
Yeah.
Um, and then they go into a lot of when they were talking about designing the strike, how closely and tight the relationship is between the test and the design team. And I thought that was really cute.
Yeah.
Just the way they kind of the test team gasses the design team up, and then in return the design team is gassing the test team up, and they're like, neither team could exist without the other team.
Yeah. Yeah.
Designers can't exist without the testers breaking their designs. And then the testers are like, we couldn't exist without the design team giving us something to break.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
it's not just breaking; it's also like validating the design. Like if the
yeah,
design is saying like, "Hey, we
playability.
intend this to be difficult, but we want it to feel rewarding and be like something you can
Yeah.
finish," like that's part of the loop there as well.
Yeah. And I thought that was just really cute because I don't think a lot of people think or talk about the working relationships between teams in games design, like game design like that.
Yeah.
And I thought it was notable. It's very cute.
Yeah.
And then they did a little cutscene at the end, and the outro music made me cry.
What was the music? Was it just like the main
It's
Destiny
it,
theme, or
yeah, but it feels like it's more of like a heavier, more grand orchestral and operatic
sure?
version of the Destiny kind of not even just the singular theme, but like the theming through Destiny.
Hmm.
You know how each expansion is like their main theme of the expansion is always a little twist on like the
Yeah.
iconic
Yeah.
Destiny theme kind of melody. Um, but yeah, it was just the little cutscene and then the music and just made me get a little bit sad.
Yeah. There were.
It's
It was even like the first part of that second VDoc where
oh,
it's, I think, is it Dave Samuels, the guy with the fantastic beard and who makes the excellent noises with his voice. It was him just talking about like, yeah, the Final Shape being a love letter, and like he was talking more about like the way the team has come together, and that got me like that was present in both of these VDocs, and that was getting me feeling some kind of way of like it feels like it also, and like of course it does, but it means a lot to them as much as it does to the players, like to be finally like weaving all of this stuff together to a conclusion. And like it's got to take some amount of like courage to end something like this and say like this is the end of this story that has been going for 10 years, because it would be so easy to just stretch it out to infinity and just like keep stringing the story along, keep introducing like new challenges or adversaries or whatever. But it's like, no, this is deeply meaningful.
what's I can't remember what piece of content it was recently, whether it was just like a little trailer thing or if it was in one of the other VDocs. But someone was like, I started working on Destiny when I was single, and now I'm married with 2 kids, and my kids are going to school.
Yeah.
Like, just as an identifier of how long they have worked on Destiny.
Mm,
So they're like, "This is a big moment for me," because
yeah.
he's like, "This game has been my career for the last 10 years." And that kind of, like, I've gotta I can't remember which piece of content that was in, but, like, that kinda got me a little bit in that moment too, where I was like, "Oh."
Yeah.
And it started me thinking, and then I started tearing up because it's like, "Oh, this might be the last time we see some of these people in the
Yeah.
context of, like, Destiny. They might move on to like post expansion content, or they might move over to Marathon. Who knows?
Yeah.
But, like, this is maybe the last time we'll get a VDoc.
I don't know if that's true. I
Or
think VDoc
but
is like a classic Bungie
but
delivery
you know what I mean?
mechanism.
Like our pre-expansion, like hype building content.
I don't think that's necessarily going to go away, because that's just like how Bungie likes to do things. And they have, even before they were doing Destiny, they had like a lot of these sort of
Yeah.
types of posts. I think it's maybe more like the specific people will change that we are seeing. But also the way they're delivering
Yeah.
seasons is going to change. You know, we're going into
Change.
episodes. It's 3 a year instead of 4.
Episodes, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it just feels very bittersweet at the moment, and I feel like that's going to magnify once the expansion is out. It's gonna be
yeah,
that bittersweet kind of feeling through the whole thing.
yeah. I've got, I guess, confidence that they will stick the landing and like have it be a satisfying end. But yeah, it is almost like a nervousness of like, I really don't know how this is going to wrap up. Like, to be very broad, like, we will defeat the witness, right? Like, sure. But like,
Imagine if
yeah, but like, how do we get there? Like, what are the story beats on the way to something so huge? When we are like,
Yeah.
when it feels like we're right on the doorstep of let's go have this confrontation, it's like, well, what are we going to be doing inside the Traveler? There was like,
What is that raid going to be? Like, how
yeah,
heavy is that raid going to be?
well, like there was also this week like a semi released by accident preview of like exotic armor pieces, and one of them, I think for the Warlock, is something that looks very much like the Speaker's mask. So like,
Mhm.
what is going on there?
Yeah.
No idea.
Was the speaker the witness the whole time?
Or are we getting a new speaker, or like is I don't know. I don't know,
Are
man.
the warlocks are the new speaker?
Yeah.
Your warlock specifically becomes the new speaker.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, it's scary. I kind of I consulted with a friend who went through this in the original World of Warcraft
Mm,
when that was coming to an end.
yeah.
Um, but he was like, "Oh, we knew another Warcraft, like World of Warcraft was coming." Like he knew, you know, OG Warcraft was just turning into a new Warcraft.
Yeah.
But I was like, am I being ridiculous, or is me being really upset in the lead up to this final expansion like valid? And he was like, "Oh no, I was devastated
Mm,
leading into the final Warcraft like expansion slash story cap." He was like, I was he's like, "I felt like I was mourning."
yeah.
He's like, "Once I finished that campaign and everything was said and done and credits rolled," he was like, "I was in mourning." And we kind of related it. I know it's dramatic because it's a video game, but we kind of related it to like knowing someone was going to pass and you pre-mourn it a little bit.
Oh, see, I have legitimately been through that. Like, my grandmother on
Yeah.
my mum's side had dementia for years before she finally passed, and like had ceased to become the woman she was years before she passed on. And so like, we dealt with a lot of the grief way before it finally happened.
Yeah. So we were both talking about it and he was like, it feels like you're pre-mourning.
Yeah.
Like you're getting a lot of the feeling out now. And then when it finally happens, you'll cry, but also it'll be elation as well. It'll be a
Yeah,
very
like
like
cathartic, right? Because
cathartic
at the moment,
cry. And I was
at the
like, "That's
moment,
so interesting," but also, like, it's a video game. And he's
yeah,
like, "That's the only way I could think of describing the kind of feeling you're going through right now."
yeah,
It's like,
it's
it's a dulled down grief cycle.
yeah,
And I was like, "Oh."
it doesn't matter that it's a video game or it's a book or it's a movie or whatever the fuck, right? Like, we have attachment to the story and the characters and the meaning that they have
And
within that
the
world.
media we consume shapes us. We
Yeah,
know that. Like, it's proven.
yeah.
So,
And this one has been around for 10 years and has always been, you know, it's a space opera. Like, everything's on a grand scale, everything is huge. And at the moment it feels like We don't know how it's going to resolve, but we know it will resolve. And I feel like I'm basically processing every possible way I could feel about something ending because I don't know which way it's exactly going to go.
I want to definitely do like whether that's written or in video form or however I do it, but like I'm already thinking about what I'm going to say in my kind of Destiny retrospective that I want to do after I finish the campaign.
Mm.
I've been started taking notes because I definitely want to do it while the feelings are really raw post campaign. But I've already started thinking about what I'm going to put in my retrospective for this game.
Mm.
Because it's been such a big part of my life that I feel like it deserves a retrospective. And whether Bungie sees that or not, or the Destiny devs see that or not, I also just want to put into the world how much this game has meant to me in the last 10 years, both Destiny and Destiny 2, and then also what this game has done for me as a human being. Because 3 years of its 10-year life cycle was the pandemic.
Yeah. And like,
It definitely became a lifeline for a lot of people.
well, yeah, and I think like, we could have found other shit to do while we were just hanging out on Discord most of the time during that
Would have
during
just
that
been
3 years.
jackpots.
Yeah, I mean that was good for evenings, but like we would have found other shit to do to like pass the time. But this was the thing we had. This is what we chose.
You guys playing Destiny while I just kept replaying the free Forsaken mission and silently sobbing over and over again over Cade's death.
Mhm. And then we got sick of hearing that,
Meckii,
so we
you playing
bought, so we
Forsaken again?
fucking bought you the expansion.
I've been stood down with no pay.
Yeah, so we figured that out.
Meckii, you watching Cade die again? Yep.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of a yes. It is. It's not just like mourning or pre-mourning this story in this world. It's also like grappling with all the shit we went through along the way. Like it is a
Yeah.
real moment in time to look back at literally 10 years of your life. And yeah,
Yeah.
three out of the 10, 30% of that, like we spent at home, not allowed to leave in a pandemic.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting because in a way, we're saying goodbye to potentially some characters that we grew up with. We went
Mm-hmm.
through our formative adult years with um characters that we've grown attached to and fallen in love with. Like, yeah, it's going to be very interesting. And I feel like even if these characters aren't killed off or don't decide to be like, yep, everything's good now, we're going
Yeah.
by Earth. Like,
Yeah.
we're done.
Yeah.
And we might be back later, who knows? We're going to go exploring. Um we probably will in more ways than one be saying goodbye to certain characters. You know,
Oh,
in certain ways.
we fully missed it, but I had like it. I think it's the second VDOC was the first time we heard Keith David as
Keith
Zavala.
David as that made me tear up because it's like he's probably gonna crush it,
Yeah.
but like, man, was that jarring seeing Zavala and not hearing Lance.
Yeah. Yeah. And
It
like,
was it was a very harsh reminder.
yeah.
Like, oh, that's right.
Yeah. Like, Keith David's voiced meaningful characters. He's done
Yeah,
plenty of voice acting. So yeah, I think like I'm not like worried about him not getting it right. It's just different.
it's jarring.
Yeah.
But then again,
We'll get used to it.
hearing then again, here, like the day he passed or they announced his passing, hearing Zavala talk was also very jarring.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that made me a little bit sad too.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
respect the new Zavala. I'm not going to be one of those quote unquote not my Zavala idiots on Twitter right now because it can't be helped.
Yeah. The
Uh,
man is dead. You kind of can't
it's not
have
like
anything else.
he was fired or anything.
No.
He cannot. But yeah, yeah, I think. The ECB episode after the expansion out is gonna be a heavy one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard.
Yeah. That's probably a good place to end it for this
Yeah.
episode. I very much doubt that we're going to get huge updates before the next episode. I feel like it's kind of, you know, tapering off right before the release.
My mission now is just to get Brave.
Yeah.
I want that Brave title.
We could be surprised. They may drop some more shit. They may do their classic, like, here's an 18-minute video just going over the history of the franchise. Like, I don't know. We'll see.
Please, no, not like the 10-year anniversary one that made us both cry.
Yeah, might just get more of that. But hey,
an orchestral cover of a song in front of the Sydney Opera House again.
Yeah, we'll find out next week if there's much to talk about. Otherwise, we'll just drop in and be like, hey, what are we doing to get ready for Final Shape? Who up grinding they gambits? Not me. I've already gilded my dredgen. But until then, yeah, like, comment, subscribe, tell a friend, boost our numbers so we can lift each other up. How
you guys feeling?
Yeah, drop down in the comments and let us know how ready you feel to potentially say goodbye to people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go cry. Maybe. I don't know. I'm feeling some kind of way right now. But hey, we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.
I'm just gonna go stand in the corner and stare blankly for a little bit.
Bye.
That'll be us. That'll be us once it's done.
Yeah. All right.
Goodbye.
See you next time.
See you guys later.